Kia ora koutou, no mahara mai ki te whare o Mahuika. Welcome and thank you for coming in to be here this morning. Firstly, I'd like to say, as we all are, our thoughts go out to everyone impacted by this Tuesday's tragedy in Newtown in Wellington. And the loss of life is always tragic, and I extend my condolences to the whānau, the family, the friends of all those who have lost their lives. I want to say to about our firefighters, our executive officers and our communications operators who did a phenomenal job in really responding to this tragedy in particular. Their acts of bravery in difficult conditions helped many people escape. And I know from the firefighters that I've spoken to of the devastation that they feel from the loss of lives despite those valiant efforts. I want to acknowledge especially our communications centre operators who are taking calls from people trapped on the night of the tragedy. I'm extremely proud of everyone from Fire and Emergency who was involved in this incident. Our fire crews once again, as they did through the weather events earlier in the year, displayed the professionalism and the expertise New Zealand would expect from our firefighters as emergency responders. This has been an extremely traumatic incident for our people and the local community. As with any significant incident, we'll undertake an operational review of our response to identify any lessons that we can learn as a result of that. We dispatched 33 trucks, over 80 firefighters from all over Wellington for the duration of that event. This is how we respond to incidents of that magnitude, with the nearest stations being dispatched as needed. We deployed a number of our specialist capabilities with a command unit, a fire truck for breathing apparatus equipment, which we call a BA tender, operational support, fire investigators, our urban search and rescue technicians who used their drone capability, one of our USAR engineers, and 2 aerial ladder appliances. Newton's 17-metre ladder truck and pumping truck were both operational at the Newtown fire, along with Thornton's Type 5 32-metre aerial appliance. While Newton's 32-metre ladder truck was off the run for maintenance, it was replaced by the normal relief appliance, which is a 17-metre ladder truck, so available for immediate response. Our 2 Newton trucks both arrived within 5 minutes of Fire and Emergency's 111 Fire Communication Centre being alerted. The Wellington District deployed significant resource to successfully manage this incident. Despite the tragic loss of life, our firefighters did an excellent job of rescuing people, limiting the fire spread, and ultimately extinguishing the fire. I've asked you here today because I'm seeing many questions coming through about Fire and Emergency's fleet and capability and capacity to respond to incidents. I can reassure you, Fire and Emergency had enough crews and specialist appliances to respond to the Newton fire. We do, however, as I've said before, have challenges with ageing fleet. 27% of our appliances are beyond their target asset life of 20 to 25 years. We've taken delivery of 241 new appliances since the creation of Fire and Emergency. We've built or refurbished 30 new fire stations since January 2018. While there's been considerable investment in fleet, property, and the back office systems since Fire and Emergency's formation in 2017, current and planned levels of capital expenditure will be really challenged to ensure the maintenance and the necessary investment in our assets to meet the needs of New Zealand communities based on our forecast income. The legacy condition of many of our stations and the fleet varied significantly from what we would consider as fit-for-purpose vehicles to those some that are barely safe to use, and the same applies to some of our stations. The condition of some of these cannot be underestimated. It will take significant investment to improve and replenish the main assets that Fire and Emergency has. Of the 20-year capital forecast of more than $2.9 billion, Fire and Emergency has a significant capital gap. The Fire and Emergency Board is looking at options and mechanisms of how we fund that shortfall, but this remains a work in progress. In the meantime, we have a large and very complex fleet and specialised trucks. We maintain them to a high standard and service them regularly. But like many older trucks, they do break down from time to time. Until we can address the modernisation of that fleet, this will continue to happen and it will continue to need the high level of maintenance that we apply to our fleet. Our plans would reduce the target asset life of our fleet from 25 years to 20 years. This will take time. It takes time and investment for appliances to be procured, built, and made ready for the use by our firefighters. We're currently in the process of purchasing 4 new replacement 32-metre heavy ladder trucks and 1 44-metre ladder truck, and have a program underway to purchase new Type 3 fire trucks, which are the predominant type used by our career firefighters in the larger metropolitan areas. We are budgeted to spend around $25 million a year on fleet for the next 3 years. This may create some challenges should we wish to really ramp up our orders as we play catch up in bringing new Type 3 appliances and aerials on stream. In the meantime, we have continued to successfully invest in the built Type 1 and Type 2 appliances across the country, and I believe we have built those to a really high spec that our stations who operate in them are very happy with those appliances. Procurement takes time, but we're working with our unions and associations to create a better, stronger fleet within our budget. In terms of staffing numbers, firefighter numbers are not where we need them to be. We have committed to addressing this, and we're working closely with the NZPFU on this matter. The Fire and Emergency Board have already agreed to an increase in firefighter numbers, recognising that firefighters are no longer willing to work overtime to the levels that they have worked historically. And we are working with the NZPFU around how many are required to enable less reliance on overtime. This includes how this will be implemented to the most effective around the country. I want to reassure the public that Fire and Emergency are ready, able and capable of responding if you have an emergency. I'd like to open the floor to questions now.
Kerry, you talked about in your statement your team's having the specialist equipment required, but we've heard from sources close to this particular fire talking about that Newtown 32-metre area unit and the fact that the absence of that definitely, in their words, restricted them tactically. Are they wrong?
What I said is when we say we got the right resources there, when we look at that fire in particular, we had a command unit there for the operations, we had 2 aerial appliances, we had our specialist USAR technicians there. It's about, at any fire that you go to, it's about what tactics you can put in place with what you've got. And as the incident evolves and more resources come in, it's about how you use those.
Okay, but the specific comment is they were tactically restricted. Yeah. So can you address that directly? Do you accept that?
Well, right now I'd like to see the outcomes of our operational review. So, like I said, we'll be doing an operational review to understand, what we can learn from it and what we have. But from first look for me, the appliances that were predetermined to go to an incident of that type, all deployed to that incident.
Mr. Gregory, have you been briefed by the firefighters who were there on the night?
I met with our firefighters on the night the next day, but I haven't had a briefing from the whole lot of firefighters that were there. No.
And what they told you, did they tell you that they were short, that the T5 the absence of the long ladder truck made a difference? Did they tell you that?
They said that they had some concerns that they had the Type 4 at Newtown rather than the Type 5 at Newtown and had to adjust their tactics as a result of that.
So how did they adjust their tactics?
Well, I'll have to wait for the operational review. I didn't go into the tactics that were deployed on the time. But what I can say is, you know, those firefighters, they did a fantastic job. When they arrived, it wasn't about the aerials, it was about making sure that we got people out of those buildings. Our firefighters went into the building to conduct rescues, and the officer that was first in charge, when I was talking to him the other day, he made a conscious decision that it was too dangerous at a particular stage to go into the next floor, and people were obviously lost. And that's what I would expect of our officers, to make sure that not only the public is safe, but our firefighters are safe in that sort of situation.
So how can you say that they had, in essence, what they needed when you have just conceded that they had concerns about the equipment there?
Well, like I say, from our predetermined responses, so every fire that you go to has a predetermined response of what sort of appliances will turn out to it, how many people will be those appliances, and those responses were sent to that particular fire. So, I mean, the rest will come out of an operational review, but just looking at first view of that, the type of trucks and the number of trucks that we would normally send to that incident were responded from what I can see.
You have looked at the timings of response though, because you said that Newtown got there in 5 minutes, but it only came with a Type 4 truck, which is shorter, so it couldn't reach the roof. When did the Thorndon 235 32-metre arrive? How much longer did that take?
Yeah, I haven't got those exact timings with me. Again, that will come out of the operational review when we look at that.
When
But
will that be? Because isn't that fundamental to today?
We can say that's 8 minutes.
okay.
Thorndon was there in 8 minutes.
Of being called.
So I've been called 8 minutes.
So Newtown within 5 and Thorndon within 8.
Yeah, so I've been called. So
the
3
Newtown-
minutes later.
The Newtown 32-metre truck, which is usually based in Newtown, it could have been there in 5 minutes, yes?
Sorry.
Newtown 225,
Yep.
if it was on the road, it would have been there in 5 minutes.
The important thing for us is that we have an aerial appliance with different capability. You know, when we say a Type 4 or Type 5 appliance, it's different capabilities. So what we had at this fire is we had a Type 4 appliance there and we had a Type 5 appliance there. That allows different tactics to be deployed because they have different operations.
Sure, so were the people on the roof waiting for rescue, they were waiting an extra 3 minutes, is that right? Because the Newtown truck that got there in 5, it couldn't reach the roof, is that correct?
That will come out as part of an operational
That is
review.
correct,
Yeah,
though,
yeah.
isn't
I couldn't comment on that. I mean,
Have you not been debriefed by the fire?
I think you have to understand, you know, how it works when you arrive at an operational incident. You know, when our first crews arrive at an incident, it is chaos. There's people everywhere. It's determining how you need to structure your fire ground, how you need to deploy your troops, what your initial priorities are that sit in there. So, you know, that's why I say when I say our people do a fantastic job, it's a real skill. It's a specialist skill in determining that. So that time of 3 minutes just to get control and order on the fire ground isn't a long time to see what to do. So that officer's on the first arriving thing, their initial actions, from my understanding, was to make internal entry and get as many people out as they like. So they're not thinking about, you know, where am I going to place my aerial appliances? That it's making the initial assessments, making sure we're keeping people safe, and making sure we're getting control on the fire ground.
The general tenor of your statement is reassurance, and it's reassurance that firefighters had what they needed, right?
Yes.
You've conceded that they've expressed concerns to you. We've heard from sources saying, in their words, they were definitely tactically restricted. How can you reconcile that with what you're telling us?
What I'm saying is I don't want to jump to any conclusions. I want to wait for the outcome of the operational review to see what we can learn from them.
But your own firefighters have told you this.
And that will come through in the review. I mean, as part of our review, it will explore, you know, how the firefighters have seen what tactics were deployed there, what the officer in charge was thinking around those tactics, and whether it would have made a fundamental difference.
Would
But
it have been better to have two 32-metre trucks there?
I couldn't answer that question because we don't know. We weren't there and we haven't seen the outcomes of the review.
Firefighters say ideally in this situation you have a 32-metre truck, two of them, so you cover two sites. Do you not know how they do that tactically?
I know how they do that tactically. I've done
So
it
you
many
said-
times
but
myself.
You said you don't know.
But what I do say is how you position the resources that you have on the fire ground are specific to any particular fire.
But the
So-
Newtown truck,
Would we have other people wanting to ask questions?
Fire and Emergency New Zealand like to see any changes from the building code after this incident, i.e. the sprinkler issue?
Yeah, I mean that's a challenging topic that I'm sure that MB's probably the right agency to ask about that. That's about how the building code's applied.
But surely you would have some concerns about the lack of sprinklers in the building.
Well, certainly, like I don't think it's appropriate for us to comment on that things, but any building that is safe for the inhabitants and safe for our firefighters is a good thing.
But
Are you
running
concerned,
out-
are you concerned that mechanical issues had any impact on saving people from the building?
Again, I'd want to see the outcome of the operational review before I could comment on
Do you
that.
know
How would you categorise the equipment used in this event? You talk about vehicles that fit the purpose. Were the vehicles in Wellington fit the purpose at the time?
Well, all the vehicles that were there were operational. They were fit for purpose. Like I said, I'm not denying it. We've inherited some huge legacy issues with the standard of our fleet, and we're going to have to work through that over multiple years to actually address that. And that's some of the frustration that our firefighters have at times, is that when you have really high standards like our firefighters do, because they just want to serve the community in the best way, it is very frustrating if you have mechanical failures or things that go wrong with the fleet. And with an ageing fleet, even though it's really well maintained, there are older trucks that are going to need to be refreshed and modernised through that. So until we can work through that process as an organisation of what we've inherited, we're going to have some times when appliances don't make it onto the fire ground.
Were there any issues with water pressure on the day?
Again, I couldn't answer that until the operational review comes out.
Do you
About
have-
the building, do you know if there's a fire evacuation plan in place for it?
With the building, I would expect that there was one, but I couldn't say 100% for that.
If
Sorry.
there was one, would it have to be FENS approved?
FENS don't approve the evacuation schemes. We input into them, but they come through for us to have a look at.
You haven't been told about any issues, again, sort of from the horse's mouth of people on the ground around water pressure and delivering water?
No, none of the crews commented to me on water pressure. Yeah.
Is there anything
Yeah.
about any of the ladders that were there freezing up or not operating full time as they needed?
None of the crews mentioned to that. Just to put that into context, when I spoke to the crews that I spoke to, this is the day after. It's really raw for firefighters. We expect to go to buildings. Most firefighters in their whole career don't go to a fatality in a building, a fire fatality in a building, let alone have multiple in one of the worst tragic fires that we've had in Wellington. So when I went to speak to them, it wasn't about how did you go to the fire, what tactics did you employ. It was about checking on their welfare and making sure that they're okay. And they're really struggling in that space because it's a really tough. You feel like you question yourself. I've been in the situation myself. You question yourself around could I have done anything different? What would have happened? And that's why it's important to wait for the operational review, and when our people have had time to get their heads around what's actually happened, to actually have a really pragmatic view of how is the operation run.
I suppose the thing
Okay,
is, though,
sorry
that-
guys, I think you keep asking the same questions over and over. I think we've probably said enough. He's
They're quite different.
But,
questions,
I suppose the thing is, though, totally accept that it's a traumatic event for firefighters, but you've said that they have offered up these concerns. So I suppose the question is, do you believe this and the statements you made to us earlier fairly reflect those operational concerns, those tactical concerns?
Yeah, like I said, I think our firefighters at the moment are very raw around this incident. If I look at as an organisation what we've faced over the last this year in particular with the floods right through the North Island, with the extreme weather conditions down in the bottom of the South Island, of these sort of fires, losing 2 firefighters in Muriwai earlier this year, it's a real challenging time for our firefighters, and I think our organisation is a fantastic organisation right across the country. We have a wider spread than anybody else as far as being in communities and being able to respond to communities quickly. and the public have a very high trust of us to know that when they need us, that we will be there and respond to them.
How hamstrung are you by funding? Is this an issue further up the line, Kieran? Do you have what you need?
Well, like I said, we've got a significant challenge around, bringing our capital assets into a level where we think that they'll be right for us. And at the moment, over our 20-year plan, like I say, there's a significant funding gap there to allow us to move those things.
What real could you explain, like a funding gap like that, what real impact might that have on the ground operationally? Can you sort of try and put that in?
Yep. Well, that means, like you're seeing at the moment, we've got 20 to 25-year plus vehicles on the ground, and so we're needing to maintain those as well as we can to a high standard. And it means that from time to time there may be some breakages in those. All but I have a lot of confidence in our maintenance providers right across the country, and our firefighters are trained to be adaptive in working with what we have on any particular fire ground. You have to remember, like, if there was a second fire the other day, well, then we would have responded to the second fire and adapted to that. We may have spread resources across the two fires, but it's never a black and white situation. It's what you've got on the ground to deal with is what you have on the ground to use.
2 more minutes.
The 4 trucks that you are buying, the long ladder trucks, are they ordered? So has a tender gone out, and when is it guaranteed they'll be delivered?
Yeah, so they've been approved, and they're now going through the procurement stage of that process.
How long will that take?
Well, it's very hard to judge now with supply chain issues and all those things.
Idea though.
Well, we would hope by the end of next year that they're here and in place. We would hope so.
You've got,
No, you go.
I was going to say, so you've got those on order, but the trucks that responded, the type 4 and 5, and then how old are those trucks? How long have they been in service? And the type 5 that wasn't in service, what was the maintenance? What's wrong with it?
I couldn't give you the specifics on those particular trucks at the moment. I mean, for me, it's not necessarily about the age of those trucks. It's about ensuring that we've got our maintenance regime strong enough so when our trucks are on the run, that there's the least chance of them having technical difficulties.
So that life,
Yeah.
are they at the end of their 25 years? Where are they?
Sorry?
Maybe at the end of their 25 years, like what in that life cycle that you talk about?
I couldn't get down to the detail of those specific trucks, sorry.
One more
The other
question.
question was the type 5 that didn't go. What was the
What
issue?
was the maintenance?
Yeah, that's off-getting maintenances. That's the only information I've got at the moment around that.
Ask us
But,
where you're at
yeah,
afterwards.
yeah.
Can we ask an ACC staff welfare question?
Beg your pardon?
Can we ask one final ACC staff welfare question?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
staff, just wondering, will FINS commit to supporting staff who've gone through this, including con staff, and including supporting any ACC claims they might have for the likes of PTSD? Will you commit to doing that?
We will certainly work through all the issues with our staff. I've made it very clear, and in fact I've spoken to both the district and the region managers in particular, that we need to really lean in and support around our staff at this time. What comes out of there, we'll deal with those as they go through.
ACC claims though, will you support them?
We haven't had any ACC claims in that, but like any claims that come through for PTSD or things like that, we look at them as far as what we can do to support in that way.